What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Celio's Network. Today I'm starting back up the Best Decks in Standard series just in time to look at the Week 1 results for Sword and Shield Standard format. So we'll be looking at OCIC and League Cup results and preparing for the Puerto Rico special event this upcoming weekend, which is the same weekend as Collinsville, that is an expanded format tournament. And I'll be talking about which decks I think are the best and explaining how maybe this can help you and why some of the other choices aren't in my top decks for standard format at the moment. Before we start looking at these decks, shout out to PotownStore.com, your best place to get PTCGO codes, and you can use code CELIO for 5% off. Also, shout out to FlipsideGaming.com, where I rate free articles, and you can use code CELIO for 10% off of your next order, $10 or more. So I have some results here with championship points earned thanks to Cashman27 on Twitter. He's a part of the PokeStats squad and a friend of mine that helps me out with data from time to time. So this is from his Twitter. Like I said, he posts a lot of really interesting data, so I do suggest following him. And this shows the championship points earned from weekend 1 of Sword and Shield, which was February 21st through 23rd. And these championship points are taken from day 2 competitors in OCIC, the League Cup that was held during day 2 of Oceania, and then 7 North American League Cups. So do note that this does not include CP earned at OCIC by players with less than 19 match points that did not make day 2, just because we don't have that complete data yet. But if you take a look, you can see that ZACIAN ADP performed 4 times better than the next performing deck CP-wise. It had 34 placements in day 2 and top 8 and ups at League Cups, I believe, or potentially just top 4s and ups, since this shows that it had 8 top 4s. So a ton of placements and so much CP. Like I said, 4,000 over 4,000 CP is 4 times more than the next best performing deck. And then the CP just goes down from there, but such a gap between number 1 and number 2. So after that, we've got PIKAROM performing second best, and then both of the Mewtwo variants performing very similarly to each other, Mewtwo Welder and Mewtwo Malamar. And then below there, we've got another cluster of decks, Ability ZARD, Baby Blounds, one of the mill variants, and Malamar, the other mill variant, and OBSTAGOON. So I think this was a really neat spreadsheet and set of data to look at, to give us kind of a statistical definition of which decks are performing the best. So I'm going to talk to you guys about the decks that I think are the best and why some of the others aren't. And like I always say, these are my opinions, but I do think this series is a good way to help you decide which decks you either want to play, or if you're not playing one of them, which decks you want to try to beat. And this can be very helpful leading up to League Cups and League Challenges and the Puerto Rico special event this weekend, and just in the near future for League Challenges and League Cups of Sword and Shield standard format. This should be helpful. So if you're not choosing to play one of the best decks, then you should probably be trying to beat maybe 3 or 4 of the best decks, and this will give you a good depiction of what I think they are and reasons why I believe my opinion is either correct or close to correct. So the first one we'll look at is ZACIAN ADP. Those results don't lie. Over 4,000 CP earned in the first weekend, and second best was 1,000 CP, so that's just insane. It has energy, acceleration, and draw built into the main attacker, which is ZACIAN V, which is just absurd. It deals 230 before damage modifications, and it can attach energy to itself, and it can draw you cards, and it only rewards 2 prizes. Cards just too good. The deck takes one-hit KOs frequently. Alter Creation deals with single prize decks, and I really don't think this deck has auto losses at the moment. And even if it does, even if you say OBSTAGOON is a really bad matchup, I don't think it's an auto loss, and some decks are prepared for it. And you could just outspeed something like an OBSTAGOON deck as well. And so it's OCIC results. 23 were in day 2 and 3 were in top 8. Now it didn't win the event, but so much championship points earned. It's such a versatile deck, such a strong deck. I think it is the best deck in format right now. Alter Creation GX just seems to shut down any kind of rogue concepts I've come up with, and it even shuts down a lot of the decks that are in the meta right now. Or even if it doesn't shut them down, it makes single prize matchups much closer than they should be on paper versus a deck based around a tag team and a 2 prize V Pokemon. So ZACIAN ADP, I definitely think, is, if it's not the best deck, it's one of the best decks. Probably one of the safest choices you can play in the current meta. Very great deck. If you're not playing it, then you want to take at least a 50-50 to it. Or if you're losing to this, make sure you're beating literally everything else. Next, we've got Mew3 Welder, which some people thought would die off because of the new turn 1 supporter rule, but looks like it's still fine. It's a versatile deck, as all Mewtwo and Mew decks are. It's an aggressive deck, as most Welder decks are. You can still go first with no Welder, just attach an energy, and then turn 2 hit 300 with Flare Blitz GX copying the Charizard. And it also naturally counters some anti-meta strategies if it plays like Stinger GX Baby Blown or Greninja GX. Just having a multitude of different GX Pokemon to copy, and sometimes non-GX Pokemon to copy, and now it even plays Victini V, so it has a strong attacker that's neither a single prizer nor a GX Pokemon. So I think it handles anti-meta strategies fairly well. Regardless of the build, it's always a versatile deck with a lot of options, so you can get around a lot of things that you might see. And its OCIC results, there were 3 in day 2. 2 of those 3 made top 8, and then 1 of those 2 won the whole tournament. So the winner of the tournament, I think it's very strong, and it's going to be played a lot. And even if it didn't win the tournament, I still think it was a solid deck, but it winning the tournament and having such a dominating showing with 3 in day 2 and then 2 of those making top 8, I think it's going to win a lot of people back on the deck that might have thought the deck was gone. Next, we've got Ability ZARD, another deck that some people thought was gone. I highly expected this to perform well at OCIC, and this time I was correct. It did perform fairly well. So Ability ZARD, again, it's a Welder deck. It's aggressive. It can take one-hit KOs. It relies on taking one-hit KOs, actually. This deck wants to always be one-shotting things. It preys on suboptimally built lists and unprepared players because it's already an established archetype with established lists, and 9 Temptations from Ninetales is just such a good ability. You don't have to flip for it like Pokemon Catcher, and you don't have to have 2 cards in your hand to perform a combo like Custom Catcher, and you can just bring up anything as opposed to Great Catcher where you can only bring up GX Pokemon. So Ninetales really preys on suboptimal lists and players that aren't prepared to play against it. And your fire Pokemon hit ZACIAN V for weakness, which is very good. So OCIC results, there was only 1 in day 2 and then 1 in top 8, and then it was the runner-up of the tournament. So I did tweet out before OCIC. I wasn't sure if anyone would even play Ability ZARD, but I thought it was a really great deck to win the tournament. And Zach Lesage did end up playing it and making it into finals, and only losing to Mew3 Welder in the end, which is still a strong deck like I just mentioned. Next, we've got PIKAROM. Not one of my favorite decks, but I cannot deny its power. It had the 2nd most CP earned, according to the data I showed in the beginning. It's an aggressive deck. It has a lot of energy acceleration with Coco Prism and Thunder Mountain and Full Blitz, and it also deals a fair amount of damage with most of its attacks. It can knock out multiple Pokemon at one time with Tag Bolt GX, which is very good. It's been an established deck for close to a year. Team Up came out over a year ago in Japan, so these lists have really been worked on for so long, and there's a couple different versions. There's ones with Zeraora without, ones with Jirachi without, and there's players that have been playing this deck since its inception that just know the deck well. They know which version they like, and they're confident in their lists. So that's really a big thing with all these newer decks coming out. Having a deck that's already been proven is very good. And of course, the deck can take one-hit KOs with Tapu Koko V and Alolan Raichu, and even Tag Bolt can take one-hit KOs in the active and on the bench. So it had 5 PIKAROMs in day 2. None of them made top 8, but it did earn such a ton of CP, like I showed, only second to ZACIAN ADP, which is dominating in CP. But it did really well in the opening weekend of Sword and Shield, and I think it will continue to do well. Next, we've got Mew3 Malamar. So the other Mew3 variant, it's disruptive unlike the other top decks since it has the Marnie Trevenor combo. It's versatile like all Mewtwo decks are. It can sometimes take one-hit KOs with attackers like Ultra Necrozma, but it doesn't always have one-hit KOs ready, and you gotta kind of give up something because you're a disruptive deck with the Gengar Mimikyu and the Trevenor. And then you also have the one-hit KO Pokemon. So it's not as one-hit KO oriented as some of the other decks, but it also has disruption, which the other decks really lack in. It naturally counters anti-meta strategies for the same reason I said Mew3. Welder counters anti-meta strategies, and it does not rely on Welder like Mew3 Welder does. It instead relies on Malamar, but sometimes, give or take, that can be a little more reliable because you don't have to hit a supporter card for your turn. You can use supporter cards to draw into Malamars instead and use that to accelerate your energies. And it's a little bit of a slower deck, so it can get slower starts and still be fine because you have your disruption strategies. It had 4 in day 2, and it did get a fair amount of CP. It was in the top 5 according to that data sheet. And I did expect it to perform a little bit better, so I was a little disappointed with its performance in the Masters division. I know it made finals in, I believe, seniors, but I do expect this to still be played a lot and to be performing well. This was only one major tournament so far. We have an entire Sword and Shield format to go, so I do think it will find success, and it'll definitely still be very popular. So on to 2 decks I want to talk about that are not in my best decks. So OBSTAGOON, why is it not definitively one of the best by my standards? So I believe the OBSTAGOON Sableye Yveltal deck to be too meta dependent, and decks can tech against it, and it also has the inconsistencies of sometimes relying on a stage 2. One thing I think players are overlooking is that the deck can be very strong without using Obstruct. So if everybody's teching against it, you can still be very strong just by trying to take one-hit knockouts with Sableye and Yveltal. That's still a very viable strategy. But in that case, you have to always be hitting what you need, I feel like, which is in early testing with the deck when I was not relying on Obstruct with my strategies, and I was trying to take not 6 prizes to win the game quickly with Sableye V and Yveltal GX. It's you need to hit what you need, or, always draw into your Rosa or be sitting on a Rosa so it can be easily disrupted by Marnie or Reset Stamp. But with the strategy of going in with just Galarian OBSTAGOON for its Obstruct to block damage from basic Pokemon, I think a lot of decks and a lot of players are prepared for that strategy. Of course, it can perform well. It did make top 4 at OCIC, but it didn't show up. It didn't have success in numbers. It didn't earn a ton of CP. So I think the deck is, of course, viable. There are plenty of viable decks in this format, plenty of viable decks not even mentioned in this video. I just don't think OBSTAGOON is one of the best right now, but of course, like I said, plenty of viable decks not mentioned in this video. OBSTAGOON, a viable deck, but just not one of the best. The other one I'll mention is Mill. This got so hyped up, it was doomed for failure. Why is it not definitively one of the best? It is known and prepared for, and decks can test against it. The same thing happened with Pidgeotto Control going into LAIC. People said it was the best deck in format. Why do we have a best deck in format like this? It's unbeatable, and Pidgeotto flopped. Same thing with Mill. People were panicking, saying we had a best deck in format before OCI even happened, and it was a degenerate deck. And I really wasn't too worried. It did make top 8. But it can be prepared for now. It is known. Decks can test against it. If people start disrespecting the deck and not teching for it, not preparing for it, then I think it'll have a successful tournament where maybe it can even win. But it was prepared for at OCIC, which maybe had it not meet people's expectations. And like I said, I don't think it is definitively one of the best decks, but it's definitely very good. And if you go into a tournament where people failed to respect it, I think you can have a great time at that tournament. So these are all the decks mentioned. The top 5 here are the ones that I placed in my category of best decks in format. And then at the bottom 2, those were ones I wanted to explain on to why they weren't in my top 5 best decks to either play or prepare for. Not mentioned also that were on the status sheet is Baby Blounds and Psychic Malamar. And I combined the 2 mill variants. And like I said, all the decks in this top 10 on the data sheet, viable decks. There's viable decks outside of this top 10. I highly suggest going and checking out LimitlessTCG.com and seeing all the deck lists from day 2 at OCIC, checking out my spreadsheet for standard format decks, which you can find on this channel. Don't be discouraged by myself or other YouTubers or article writers not talking about the deck that you want to play, or not putting the deck that you want to play in your top 5. If you like OBSTAGOON Sableye or you like Mill, I'm sure you can find success with it. It's just not what I would define as one of the best decks right now. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video and it helped you out a bit. As always, subscribe to the channel if you would like to see more content like this in the future. Check out PotownStore.com for all of your PTCGO needs, FlipsideGaming.com for articles written by yours truly, and I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.